Hello, everyone. Okay, this is part two of the lesson on the Liberal Democrats. And what we're going to have a look at in this session are the two types of Liberals. So, just like with Labour, how you've got different groups of Labour politicians, you have the more New Labour type of politicians, where you might class the more moderate Labour politicians, and of course, you have the more left wing Labour politicians. And just like in the Conservatives, how you've got like the One Nation Conservatives, you've got the Thatcherite Conservatives. The Liberal Democrats also have two groupings. And so what we're going to look at today are these two groups. Now, they come from the philosophy of liberalism. When we look at philosophies, we'll look at these in some detail. But liberals believe in certain key things. Okay, yet there are two factions of this. So the first we're going to have a look at is something called classical liberals. This is like the original form of liberalism, comes from the ideas of people like John Locke in the 17th century, and they lasted really, they kind of dominated liberal thought until the mid-Victorian period. They believe basically that people should be free to do whatever they please apart from restrictions by law. So in other words, they call this negative freedom. So you can do whatever you like unless the law says you can't do something. They also believe that the state was almost like a necessary evil. So the state was needed to act like a referee in society, but government should be limited. They feared overstrong governments. They believed that government action should be as limited as possible, and there should be lots of things put in place to try and limit the power of government, what they can do. So the most prominent example of liberalism today is the American Constitution, which gives power to the different institutions in America, but also puts lots of restrictions on the power of those different institutions. In more recent times, I suppose, this kind of power of governments has been limited by things like democracy, civil liberties, and it's one reason why liberals very much believe that power should be as close as possible to where people are. So in other words, it should not be held in one place, but it should be given to local areas. They tend to be strong supporters of local government, very strong supporters of things like devolution, this type of stuff. In terms of the economy, again, liberalism matches what we said before. They do believe very much in free trade. The state should be fairly small. It should not really intervene a great deal in the economy. And in many respects, you could argue that Mrs. Thatcher was a classical liberal with regards to her views on the economy. They often call some of these conservatives who have this kind of view of economics neoliberals, meaning that they are like liberals, basically. Now, within the current Liberal Democrats, or recent Liberal Democrats, Nick Clegg and Vince Cable are definitely parts of this group. They wrote a book, I think it's called The Orange Book. I have a feeling it was a book which had an orange front cover. Either way, they are known as Orange Book liberals because they wrote this book where they gave out their philosophical ideas on classical liberals and how that affects the current Liberal Democrat Party. Now, the other type of liberal also comes from the same philosophy of liberalism. So again, no, the state is something which should be constrained. There should be limits on the state. People should be as free as possible. But modern liberalism, sometimes known as Beveridge liberals or progressive liberals, they argue that people can't be free if they're in poverty. If someone's in poverty, they're having to juggle around 2 or 3 different low-paying jobs. They are not free. They are constrained by those poorly paid jobs, or their time's taken up doing those jobs. They don't have the luxury, if you like, to say, I want to jack this in, I want to get an education and get a different job, or anything of that nature. So these liberals believe that people or individuals cannot be free if they live in poverty. You can hear lots of bangs, by the way, because I'm doing this on bonfire nights, and there seems to be lots of fireworks going around. There's not like a riot in the street outside or anything like that. So they believe that that people cannot be free if they live in poverty, and therefore the state has a responsibility to reduce poverty, to remove things in society which are preventing people from maximising their free choice and freedom of action. Okay, and so as a consequence of this, the state has a duty to provide some kind of welfare to reduce the negative impacts of capitalism and therefore give people that freedom which they might require. William Beveridge, who was a civil servant in the 1940s, he wrote a report called the Beveridge Report, and Mr. G out on there, which basically said there were 5 evils in society: want, poverty, poor education, etc., etc. And his blueprint became the welfare state, which Labour then introduced virtually wholesale in the 1945 general election, or after it. There's William Beveridge. The SDP, who helped to form the Liberal Democrats, they are perhaps the part of the Liberal Democrats who are most supportive of these modern liberal ideas, this kind of more progressive side. So, despite having 2 groups, there are some key or core Liberal Democrat policies and ideas which kind of unites them. The first one is they're very pro-European. This has been throughout. The liberalism tends to believe in international organisations, again, as a way of kind of preventing war and preventing conflict, and Britain should take a full role in this. Liberal Democrats are very supportive of the European Union. They support devolution and the creation of metro mayors in cities of the UK. It's about moving power away from Westminster, making decisions more local, and again, it's about limiting the size of government in Westminster and limiting where power is located. They tend to believe in fair taxation, and they want some reform to the taxation system. They tend to support, even the Orange Book Liberals tend to support welfare as a way to help the less well off. And they wish to reform the voting system to make it fairer. This is something which they're very keen on. Cynically, you might say, it's because they always do badly at the current voting system. But I think as well it fits into their ideas about limiting power to reform the voting system. They also dislike the House of Lords as well. They say it's not democratic. Why is it not a democratically elected body? Okay, so that is kind of where the Liberals are and the Liberal Democrat 2 main factions. What I'd like you to do is in your booklet, which you can see here, this page you needed to fill in when I went through like the history bit. Underneath it, when I can just let me scroll the page down. Just give me a moment. Here we go. Underneath it, or on the next page, there's a couple of questions. One is what is meant by Orange Book Liberals, what is meant by Beveridge Liberals. So the PowerPoint I've just done goes through that. And then here we can see some policies of Nick Clegg when he was leader of the Liberal Democrats. And as I was saying before, perhaps one reason why Nick Clegg got on quite well with David Cameron and why some Liberals were more than comfortable to be in that coalition was because those Orange Book Liberals, you might argue, they support the Conservatives on those economic policies. Those policies of Mrs Thatcher were quite attractive to the Orange Book Liberals. It's about removing the state kind of control over the economy. So what I'd like to do, these here are some of the ideas and policies of the Liberal Democrats whilst they're in coalition with Nick Clegg. It's up to you. You can highlight it in orange, the ones which were supportive of the Orange Book, if you like. You can, write EOB by them, whatever you want to do. But you need to identify which of these policies and ideas are those of the Orange Book, and which of these ideas show more of an influence by the more Beveridge or modern or progressive Liberals. And then what I'd like to do, this is the 2017 Liberal Democrat Manifesto. Obviously, it's not the most recent one, it's the 2017 one. And again, I'd like to do the same exercise. Looking at the 2017 manifesto, again, which ones show more Orange Book ideas and which ones show more kind of progressive ideas? One or two that might fit into both. Okay, like for example, the EU one, for example, Orange Book and Modern Liberals believe in that, so that would fit into both. So, colour those into the relevant colours, all right, OB, or whatever. Okay, don't do this bit. Okay, I'll leave that for another time. Well, actually, yeah, do this bit as well. Once you've done those, look at the 2019 election manifesto. If you type into Google Liberal Democrat Manifesto 2019, look for the BBC website as one of your options, because they have a nice overview of all the parties and their policies. So what I'd like to do, because what you need to know for the exam specification, is what are the views of the Liberal Democrats on these 4 areas. So again, fill in that using the manifesto from 2019. If you want to underneath write education down as another one or any other one, then please do feel free. You do need to know the ideas and policies of the Lib Dems. So basically, you're going to get all the Lib Dems done this weekend. Then when I see you in lesson next week, those I see in lesson, we'll have an overview chat about the Liberal Democrats. If I've got you on Teams first, then we'll spend the first bit of time going over the Liberal Democrats on Teams before we move on to the next section. Okay, any problems or issues with that, then please do let me know, but hopefully it should all make fairly much common sense.